But I was this new guy in this organization.
How do you connect with the army that has to follow you?
It was about survival mode, but still an eye-opener nonetheless.
For me, it changes the way your mind reasons and problem solves.
I have a concept called on the table, in the fridge, in the bin.
Hierarchy only exists when
People can even challenge me on my view.
I think South Africans are softer.
Because you have to be a lot tougher.
So it's almost like this knife's edge we walk on.
It feels so intense.
Really? Why would you say go and get a university education? Or I fear that if we become another Australia, how do you navigate that world? What are the ingredients to it? Welcome to the Autobiography, a video series that shines the spotlight on inspiring leaders, capturing their fascinating stories, their personal journeys, and key leadership lessons that uncovers the secrets to their success. Today, I'm privileged to be joined by the Managing Director of Stellantis South Africa, Leslie Ramsoomar. Welcome, Leslie. Managing Director for Stellantis South Africa. It's really nice to have you here. I'm really honored to have you sitting in this chair and learning about your career path to your current position at Stellantis, as well as hearing about the history of Stellantis. Where does it come from? You know, how did it end up existing? But before we get there, hobbies and interests. What are your personal hobbies and interests?
So firstly, thanks, George, for having me. I think it's interesting and exciting to see that you do this for the motor industry in terms of career aspirations and people who may want to look at a career in motor industry. I think it's a good insight that we can give people to the industry. To answer your question on hobbies and interest, I am in the car game because I'm an absolute car nut. I spend most of my time I mean, if it's viewing, it's motorsport, but otherwise it's kind of working on cars. I've had a couple of classic cars myself that I spend time on working. And strange as it may sound, I mean, kind of detailing a car is quite therapeutic for me, so I do that quite often as I get the chance.
Detailing is in the aesthetics?
Well, cleaning it up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, detailing the car. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And obviously, I mean, outside the motor industry, sport, football, cricket. Yeah.
Playing or watching it?
Watching, well, I think my days of playing are behind me, but now it's more watching it, yeah.
Okay,
yeah. And then obviously traveling with my family as much as I can.
And you obviously live in Johannesburg.
Yes.
Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in a little rural town called Verulam in KwaZulu-Natal. I was there until 1999 and then moved up to Johannesburg for career prospects.
Okay. And you know, when we're growing up, like teenager, we've often got these aspirations.
Yeah.
We want to become something. What did you want to become when you were a teenager?
I've always wanted to become a motor mechanic.
Really?
When I was a teenager, I was, I mean, I think it's clear now I'm fascinated by cars. So I spent a lot of my time tinkering and I said to my dad, who was quite old school at the time, you know, I want to go to trade school and become a motor mechanic. And he said, no ways, you finish your matric and then you can decide what you want to do. And that kind of stuck, you know, the auto industry kind of stuck.
Yeah. And did you ever chase that career path, or?
You know, I actually, for financial reasons, I couldn't study further immediately after school. I got a job in a dealership as a parts salesman, and kind of one thing led to another. And I mean, I'm sure we'll have time in a couple of minutes to talk about it. But it's not something I chased. I knew I wanted to be in the motor industry, so I did whatever I could to get a foot in. But I've never really chased the next job after that.
Yeah. What was your first car?
My first car was a 1987 Nissan Sentra 1.6 GL.
Oh, I remember those Nissan Sentras.
Yeah.
What color was it?
It was kind of olive green,
Green.
metallic.
Yeah. I think one of my friends when I was, you know, in my late teens, early 20s, had a red one. This was a Nissan Sentra, a red one, and it was a beautiful car. Still that box shape that was so popular back then. So as you know, as you're growing up, you know, you career going, and then you get into this parts salesperson role. You know, take me a little bit further into your 20s. How long were you in that role, and what progressed you to the next phase?
So look, I mean, like I said, I didn't have the opportunity to study further academically after school. I did throughout my career afterwards as I could afford to, but So I got a role as a parts salesman, but I actually spent most of my time in the workshop because I wanted to be a mechanic, kind of with the technicians. I mean, I was quite successful as a parts salesman because I understood the mechanics of a car, so I could quickly attend to my customers' needs at the time.
So you understand big end bearings,
Exactly.
crankshaft, all that stuff.
Yeah, and you get to learn part numbers. I mean, I still have some part numbers in my head. And so you kind of, because you understand the car, you understand where the part fits, you learn the numbers. So you become quite efficient when a panel shop or a workshop calls you to order a part. You can rattle off the number, give him his price, and off you go. Yes. So, you know, I did that for about a year and a bit. And then I kind of got this interest in selling cars. So I moved then to the vehicle admin department. I was a stock controller in a vehicle dealership. People in the industry will understand what that is, invoicing of cars, preparing them for delivery, etc.
Independent dealership or a franchise dealership?
No, it was a Nissan franchise dealership. Nissan, it was then the McCarthy Group.
Okay.
The dealership was Daytona Nissan in Umhlanga Rocks.
Okay.
You know, I kind of then really wanted to sell cars. I thought, you know, I mean, I really have an interest to sell cars. I was passionate about them. I loved the brand at the time that I was working with. I kind of never got the opportunity there to do it. I mean, even came in on Saturday saying, guys, you don't pay me anything. Just let me come in on a Saturday. Let me help you guys out. I was kind of assistant to the salesman. You know, when they were busy, I was taking customers on test drives, doing the sales pitch, not for any compensation, just because I was interested in it. And then my daughter was born in 98. And that kind of forced me to look for additional revenue streams, additional income. So then I moved to Johannesburg, got a prospect then with Renault as a used car salesman. And kind of that's how my sales career started. So I sold cars for Renault for about 2.5 years, then got promoted to used car manager. So I ran a used car operation there until I think 2004. Promoted to dealer principal. I ran the Renault branch in Northcliffe. 2007 got the opportunity to become a sales director for Renault in South Africa.
Oh wow.
I did that for about 8 years. It was time for me to move on. I'm giving you a fast track summary.
No, that's perfect. That's perfect.
The opportunity was actually created for me to go to the Middle East. So I lived in Dubai, worked with Renault looking after the 14 countries in the Middle East as a deputy managing director for Renault.
It's funny how almost all of the, actually think all of the people that I've done this with have, in their path to leading an OEM, have had this international stint that you talk about.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's necessary in the sense that I think it kind of opens your mind to motor industry outside South Africa. Because, I mean, I've spent the last few minutes telling you about my career in South Africa. But, you know, when I went to the Middle East, it was a complete eye-opener for me in terms of there's a different world in terms of the auto industry.
Yes.
And you can bring a lot of that stuff back. So my role there was looking after what we call importers, general distributors for the Renault brand in the Middle East. It's a completely different business model. And you deal with cultures. I mean, there are so many different cultures in the Middle East. You deal with people that are running this business from all over the world. Not a South African background that you know we kind of understand each other, yes. Irrespective of different races. We have a South African kind of culture.
Well, that's a uniquely South African thing.
Absolutely,
you know, and we probably fit into that diverse world a lot easier than most.
It was easier for me to adapt than some of my colleagues, but still an eye opener nonetheless. Because you have people from different countries, not different cultures in one country, or different races in one country. Yeah, so that was, I think it taught me to become a little bit more of a hard nut, because you have to be a lot tougher working in the Middle East, dealing in the Middle East. It's just the nature of Middle Eastern people that, you know, sometimes you think that you're actually in a meeting having an argument with somebody, but you're actually having a general conversation, but it feels so intense.
Really?
And you kind of have to adapt to that, because as South Africans, we generally, you know, amenable to kind of casual conversations, respectable way of doing things.
Do you think South Africans are softer?
I don't think they're softer. No, I think they're more respectful.
Maybe politically correct?
More politically correct, but I do think that South Africans can make a point when they need to make a point. And I don't think they're tolerant of being disrespected.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's almost like this knife's edge we walk on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay, so you did the stint in the Middle East, then you came back.
Yeah, so I did that for 2 years in the Middle East. My daughter was entering university years, And so she wanted to come back home to do a university here. So we kind of came back specifically for that reason. I got offered a job as a sales director for Nissan South Africa. I did that for just over 3 years. And then the current opportunity came up in 2020, 2 weeks before COVID hit.
2 weeks before COVID.
So, yeah, I took this new role, and 2 weeks into it, it was COVID. And I mean, we all know, I won't tell you what we had to go through, but I was this new guy in this organization that was under construction and still is under construction and trying to navigate through COVID. Yeah, so it was a learning experience for me.
So that's quite a big deal. I mean, how do you connect with teams, people, your new, army that has to follow you, create a vision, convince people of that vision for Stellantis, and suddenly you're sitting at home?
It was tough for me, running this big organization. So, and I think during COVID, it was about survival mode, not really time for strategy about the future, etc.
Yes.
And so we had, in fact, it's an interesting name that the company came up. It was a meeting called KTV, Kill the Virus. And it was every morning at 8 a.m. So we had the teams on every morning at 8 a.m. It was an hour meeting, kind of discussing yesterday, discussing what we need to do today. And we kind of went as far as the end of the week in terms of planning, because it was so unpredictable.
Yes.
And I think that's
waiting for the family meetings.
Exactly. I think that's what kept us motivated, kept us going as an organization. Kind of being a newbie, also using those meetings to learn what's going on in the organization, what the challenges are for the people. So I spent my time in the first couple of months during COVID kind of really kicking stones out of the way,
yes,
as opposed to building strategy. On top of COVID, we were an organization, as I said, under construction. When I joined, it was just the Peugeot Citroën brand that had just been bought back by the group from an importer. We were in the midst of getting the Opel brand into the group stable. So it was a lot of kind of building going on at the same time while we were navigating through COVID, but we found our way through it, and
wow,
like all South Africans generally did, right?
You're now sitting in this place in your career. If you could go back and change something, or give your younger self some advice, what would that advice be?
I think it would have been try to find a way to get an academic qualification much earlier in your life. It's something that I struggled with growing up, kind of not going straight from school into university, into an academic, getting an academic qualification. So, and I know it's not always possible financially for most people, but even if you're not formally going for an academic qualification because of whatever reason, don't stop learning.
Yes,
I mean, you can find material everywhere. Learn, read, study. That's the advice I'd give myself, my younger self. Just keep learning, keep reading, keep studying.
I mean, I'd like to get into why that is, because I find that tertiary education doesn't really matter what you study or what your vocation is when you go to study, except for things like, I suppose, a specialist doctor or some sort of very special vocation or study or course. And in and of itself, that will do the same thing. And that is, for me, it changes the way your mind reasons and problem solves. So, does that resonate with you? Why would you say go and get a university education or education?
Absolutely. I think sometimes, as you go through your career at different stages, you always get roadblocks with certain things. There's always something that you kind of rack your mind and you can't figure out. And I can guarantee you there's always somebody somewhere out there that has faced the same situation and has found a way through it. And so I find, the more I read, the more I research, the more I watch podcasts, videos, the more it kind of resonates with me. It's just, actually there's a solution, or I could have done it that way. And that's why if we're talking about hindsight, it's like, I wish I knew that 5 years ago,
yes.
So I think there's always a lesson in everything, and it may not be a lesson that you need today, but it will be a lesson that you need somewhere on your journey, either personally or professionally.
I don't know who said this, but I was listening to somebody a long time ago said, if you think about it, there's very little that's been invented. Most things in life have really just been built on someone else's next idea, taking something and making it better rather than inventing it from scratch.
Yeah.
So very little that comes from nothing. You know, maybe the light bulb is an invention, but everything after that is not really an invention. It's just an iteration on somebody else has faced the problem.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the life in a day of Leslie.
It has structure, but I don't beat myself up if it doesn't follow structure on a certain day. But generally, my body clock kind of up around 5-ish. The first thing I do is my morning devotions. I pray. That's even before I get out of bed. That's the first thing I do, and then I do my exercise routine on the treadmill. I'd like to do it more often than I do, but that's something I do. And then a cup of coffee, and then get out the house as soon as I can, and head to the office.
Okay.
Process the day in the traffic. So I don't spend too much time listening to the radio. I kind of work out my diary for the day, how I'm going to address the different meetings, the different issues, and then get to the office. And I think when you get to the office, it's just go, go, go. The days are generally structured with a diary after that. I try my best to get out of the office at a reasonable time. Doesn't always work, but recently I'm becoming more deliberate about it. My daughter's now an adult, moved on her own, so I'm conscious that my wife needs my time, so try to get home in time for dinner, and then chit-chat with my missus, catch up on the day, watch a bit of TV, read a little before bed, and lights out.
Okay. What are you reading? What are you reading generally?
I've just finished Shoe Dog. Shoe Dog is the story of Nike.
Okay.
Interesting read if you haven't read it. Again, it's just, to summarize it very quickly, it's about the tenacity of the businessmen around behind Nike.
Yeah.
It's all the struggles that we all face day by day, whether it's competition, whether it's cash flow, innovation, quality of product, all these kind of things. It's an incredible book. If you haven't read it, I encourage you to do it.
I'm definitely going to take note of that. But Nike is, Nike's just an average shoe. It's not magic. And I think it's just a marketing genius.
It is a marketing genius, sure. It's not just an average shoe. I'm a car salesman, but when you read the book, you'll see the amount of effort and engineering and kind of tech into it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I suppose that's true in terms of if it's got all this technology built into the shoe, and nobody's going to know unless you really market it properly. But
sure, absolutely.
They haven't taken the route to market the technology. They've taken the route to market the lifestyle.
True.
Rather than the technologies. The technology is there by default, but they've marketed almost what Apple did.
Yeah.
The tech's there, but they don't really market the tech. You don't hear about Apple, marketing the bits and bytes and speeds as much as they market the ease of use. It's nice to look at, nice to touch, nice to feel. The lifestyle with an Apple product. Is that what's part of that?
I think the brand image at the end of the day is the most important, right? Because that's what attracts anybody to the brand.
Yeah.
So I think Nike does an incredible marketing job. That's your point. They're great at it, and they hold a good image, like Apple does, or most products that are popular. But I think what's important is that the product's got to deliver afterwards, and I think that's where the tech and the engineering comes in with Nike or Apple or any one of our products that we represent.
In your leadership role, you're leading over 100 people, as I understand.
Yeah.
How do you foster collaboration, accountability, and all the things that go into leading a business of this magnitude?
Yeah, I think we need to go maybe a few steps back in terms of who the organization is. Stellantis is a merger of the ex-PSA and ex-FCA. And for the viewers, PSA would be your Peugeot, Citroën, Opel, Vauxhall, DS brands. And FCA was your Jeep, Fiat, Alfa, Chrysler, Dodge, Ram, Lancia brands. So it's a company that's come together in 2021. So you can imagine that we have today two cultural backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds merged into one organization. And the only thing we have common is South Africa and selling cars. But it's kind of decades of organizational culture that were very different, you know, mainly French, and the other one being European US, Italian US. So, you know, we spent a lot of time trying to create a new Stellantis culture. I think we've made some progress. I don't think we're there yet, because it's.
How do you create that culture? I mean,
Well,
what are the key ingredients? Because I mean, it's interesting that you mention the merger of different cultures, right? But at the end of the day, you've got to create one. You know, it's difficult to maintain two subsets. How do you navigate that world? What are the ingredients to creating that new culture, as you put it?
I think that safety in the organization is important. I think that people have to feel safe in the organization that they work. And when I say safe, I mean because there are so many different cultures in the organization, you have to be able to speak your mind. You have to be able to put your point across. You have to be able to encourage somebody else to listen to your point of view. And you have to be able to feel safe to do that without fear of being victimized or put down because, listen, I'm from this company and you from that company, and that's not how we do things here.
Yes, yes.
No, how we do things here is the new way of doing things. And so safety is important. People need to be able to feel safe to express themselves at all levels in the organization. And something I'm trying to do with my leadership team is to foster this environment of safety where people can even challenge me on my view without fear of, of consequences of victimization. It's an open discussion. That's the one that we try to drive, this concept of safety.
But then how do you hold people accountable?
So, I mean, you hold people accountable. Any business has KPIs, and the KPIs have to be reasonable. So we have this concept called mutual purpose, and it means that when we set ourselves a target internally, we all agree on the target. It's not I'm telling you need to sell 5,000 cars, and you think you can only sell 1,000. Yeah. We need to agree on the target. Yes, it's always stretched. Target's always stretched. So we have this concept called mutual purpose. We sit down at the beginning of the month and we say, okay, guys, this is a target we're going to chase. And it may be a little bit stretched, but that's fine. So we hold people accountable because we agree on the number. And then there's KPIs and tracking. And I think the other way we hold people accountable is they have to be able to have the opportunity to explain why they couldn't or didn't. Okay. With good data that's backed up. And then it informs the decisions for the next steps. So I think that one way we hold people accountable, it's not that your target. End of the day, I'm not interested in how you get there, right? So we have this thing called mutual purpose. We have the safety that, and it's kind of publicly spoken about. We speak about we are an organization that wants to be safe. Mm-hmm. And I think the last point is just mutual respect. We're humans. There's hierarchy in organizations, but at the end of the day, we're all human beings, and we need to have a mutual respect for each other.
Yeah. I mean, I always say that hierarchy only exists when there are problems, when the hard conversations need to happen. But outside of that, we're all just one team, and so the hierarchy doesn't really exist, and we can all work together. Does that resonate? I mean, it sounds to me like that's what you're kind of explaining.
That's what I'm saying when I talk about these concepts that we have in the organization. When we sit around a boardroom table discussing a topic, we equals. We're discussing a topic. And you're right, a hierarchy, in my view, a hierarchy exists so people in higher positions can protect the team and enable them to do what they need to do, not the other way about. So we're there to enable the teams to do what they need to do, not to sit there in an elevated position.
Ivory towers.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, our offices are kind of everybody on one floor. Yeah. Leadership team is visible. We kind of and accessible. Yes. And I spend a lot of my time walking around the office. It's not pick up the phone to send a message.
No, there's a real thing called management by walking around.
Absolutely.
It's a good thing.
And I think it encourages the team to do the same. You don't sit in your corner doing what you need to do. You collaborate.
Yeah, exactly. So you touched a little bit on Stellantis. So let's get into that a little bit deeper. Stellantis is kind of a merger of a whole lot of brands.
Yeah.
How did Stellantis start up? Where does Stellantis come from originally?
So look, it didn't exist pre-2021. Like I said, it was these two companies, FCA and PSA, that were operating on their own. So in 2021, it was actually a merger. It was not a buyout of one of the other. And we came together, formed the company called Stellantis, and the name comes from Stella. So a combination of the stars, the brands the brands being the stars.
Okay.
And so Stellantis is the holding company. It's not an automotive brand per se. We have all of our brands that I mentioned, and the brands will always be the stars of Stellantis. Stellantis is the holding company. So we merged in 2021, and since then have had just incredible record results from a volume, profit, cash flow point of view. So, I mean, it's an organization, it's one of the mergers that have had incredible results and incredible benefits for all of the brands and all of the team members collectively.
Where's the headquarters for Stellantis?
So the headquarters is in Amsterdam, the holding company. But the brands are all over. I mean, Jeep, Dodge, Ram are in the US, Fiat, Alfa in Italy, Citroën Peugeot in DS in France, Opel in Germany. So yeah, we all over the place. So I think we maintain our brand heritage and our brands' images, and they stay in their home countries.
So just so kind of everybody understands, Stellantis is the entity, and the brands are in the control of Stellantis. So, for instance, Dodge in the US is a Stellantis brand.
Yes.
And Stellantis decides where to export those cars, to which countries get them, etc. Do you manufacture in South Africa? No.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay,
No.
I like the word yet. So it's more about your plans in terms of manufacturing in South Africa and which brands.
Yeah, so we signed an MOU framework with the DTI in collaboration with the IDC to set up a manufacturing facility in South Africa. A lot of the details are still confidential, but I'll share with you what I can. But before I get there, let me just give you a bit of a framework in terms of why.
Okay.
So we belong to the Middle East Africa region of Stellantis, and we have an ambition for the Middle East Africa region to sell 1 million cars by 2030. It's called our Dare Forward strategy. And the one thing we've learned post-COVID is that we need to have autonomy in our production inside our region, because we were quite dependent on the rest of the globe. So as a result, we've started setting up manufacturing plants. So in fact, 2 are legacy plants. We have a plant in Morocco that's just doubled its capacity to 400,000 units per year. We have a plant in Turkey with a JV with a local partner called Tofaş. They do 420,000 cars a year. So already running an operational 800,000 cars produced in the Middle East Africa region. And then we are now on projects in Egypt, Algeria for plants, and we have SKD plants in the interior of Africa. South Africa is obviously known as a production hub for Africa, and we wanted to take the benefit to bolster our 70% production autonomy for the region by closing kind of South Africa as the other bookend. So we have North, we have South. We plan to ramp up at first phase 50,000 units per year, of which about 50 to 60% will be exported. Again, coming back to the autonomy of the region, so we want to produce cars in our region for our region. Our aim is to set it up by 2025 in one of the port cities in an SEZ. So those are the kind of T's and I's we're busy going through now to determine which city, what models, etc. So we're down to about 3 models.
Wow.
And we'll conclude very soon on what model will be built and exported from South Africa.
That's like tomorrow. I mean, it's 2023 already.
Yeah, I think, the group's got 100 plants globally.
Wow.
So they have good experience in setting up plants. So I think once the box is ticked and it's a go, it'll happen pretty quickly.
How long does it take to set up a plant?
Look, I mean, greenfield operation can take about 18 months.
Okay, so you're on the cusp of kind of like starting
Yeah.
that process. Wow.
Yeah, but I mean, we've seen, for example, I mean, we've seen Toyota do an incredible job in terms of recovering their plant after the flood. I think in 6 to 8 months. So it speaks to the tenacity of the industry and South Africans in general.
Well, if you want to do something, you'll do it.
Absolutely.
That's interesting that you want to start manufacturing cars in South Africa, in the region, for the region. I like that term. How does that fit into, because I mean, where are most of the cars in the region sold to? I'm assuming Europe.
So we produce in Turkey and Morocco today for Turkey and Morocco, but then exported to Europe,
Yes.
mainly for Europe.
Now, Europe's got this 2035 deadline for electric vehicles.
Yes.
And Stellantis is setting up a manufacturing plant for ICE vehicles, I'm assuming, in South Africa.
At the start, yes.
Isn't at the start, interesting. So my question was going to be, isn't that kind of like counterintuitive? Aren't you investing in old technology, or is there another strategy?
So our plants in the north that I mentioned in Europe and North America, they're moving towards EV production. Our plants in Turkey and Morocco will be a kind of a hybrid of both. South Africa will start with ICE, and it depends on what the DTI comes up with in terms of production incentives for EV.
Yes.
We have capability as Stellantis to switch to EV.
Okay.
And it is our intention to manufacture EV.
Yes.
But it doesn't deter us from our initial plan in setting up the plant.
Okay.
So I think, as Africa, Middle East, I think the switch to EV will be a lot slower than the north. So I think there will still be a significant demand for ICE engines in the years to come.
Yeah.
So we're setting ourselves up to answer that question, the supply of ICE engines. But we can very quickly move to EV because we have the capability globally to do it.
That's very interesting and exciting because, South Africa, I'm nervous that South Africa loses a lot of its manufacture because of this deadline in Europe. And I mean, you just said north of 60% of the vehicles you manufacture here will be exported. And that's the case with most of the manufacturing plants in South Africa. Is north of 60% of those vehicles are exported to Europe and England. Yeah. And I fear that if we don't get the right incentives in place, that we become another Australia, because Australia is a pure importer, and that's expensive on the country and lots of job losses. But it looks like you've kind of taken that into account. Even without incentives, you're still going to set up a manufacturing plant, which means you've got a strategy which is quite exciting. Let's talk about the future of EVs for a little bit. You have EVs in the fleet. Tell us a little bit about what they are.
Yeah, so globally, all of our brands have EVs. Some are progressing much quicker than others. So when you look at Stellantis South Africa, as an organization, as my organization, we are ready to bring EVs to the market tomorrow because they exist globally. The only deterrent today are the local conditions, the taxes, the duties, the infrastructure. So I mean, the price of the car today is really what deters us. I think the burden of acquisition cost burden of EVs is just too much for typical South Africans to bear at the moment. Even though the long-term cost savings and benefits are there, I think the acquisition cost is still a bit high.
But I mean, most South Africans are living, salary to kind of like food. It's a difficult time.
Yeah. So what we need obviously is policy change to ensure that EVs are more affordable, and we're ready to do it. And the second thing we need is then also affordable EVs, entry-level affordable EVs, which I guess all manufacturers are working on. That will answer the needs of South Africans. I mean, today we have, in our stable, we have great products. We just launched 2 weeks ago the Citroen C3 at 230,000 Rand. It's a low-emission, low fuel economy vehicle that answers the needs today for South Africans.
Yes.
But I think that I think EVs are unavoidable. The question is, when will we switch? Or alternative energy is unavoidable. The question is, when will we switch? And will South Africa's switch to EV in a big way, or to the next big thing that comes after EV? I think that's really a question that needs to be answered.
That's so true. That's so true. So before we move off Stellantis, what in the immediate future can you tell us that is exciting in the next 6-12 months besides the manufacturing plant? Any exciting cars besides the C3 that is coming to market?
Yes, so I mean, we firstly as an organization, I think we're an organization, as I said to you, I think before we started the interview, under construction. So we trying to settle our own organization, create a stable base in the country, because we've come through COVID and we've come through the mergers, and I think we now kind of settled our internal organization. And in the meanwhile, we've been launching products. If I take the Peugeot brand, we've launched 208, 2008, 3008 Landtrek, so that entire range is refreshed. Citroën, we launched the new C5, C3 Aircross, and 2 weeks ago the new C3. The Opel brand, we launched Mokka more recently, and we're about to launch CSUV Opel Grandland. So we have a lot of brands and a lot of products that come to market on Alpha. Next week we launched the facelifted Stelvio. At the end of last year we launched the hybrid Tonale, which was the first alternative energy for our brands in the market. Jeep, we just launched Grand Cherokee, the new Grand Cherokee, the Gladiator, which is a Jeep pickup. And Fiat, we launched facelifts on the Fiat 500 and the Fiat 500X. So all of our brands have had recent launches or facelifts. What's coming next, as I said to you, Stelvio is coming next, Opel Grandland is coming next. I can't give too much away, but I think there's facelifts coming later on in the year for many of the brands. So that's in terms of product. I think we're quite ambitious about our position and our growth in the market. Even if the economy is tightening up, the market conditions today are quite tough. We're not fair weather sailors, and we have a long-term view about the country. And it's because, in the kind of Mediterranean crown or the northern part of Africa, Turkey, we hold in excess of 30% market share. Wow. For the Middle East Africa region with our brands. And the only place that growth is going to come from in our region is South Africa, because we hold a very low market share today. Okay. And Sub-Saharan Africa will grow as quickly as the TIV grows. But South Africa is the third biggest TIV in our region, and our market share is very low. All the pressure is put onto South Africa for growth, because that's where the region growth is going to come from, the growth in South Africa. So we're setting up our operation. We've just opened at the beginning of this month our new offices, our new technical and non-technical training center. We talked about manufacturing. So even our volumes may be low today, our long-term ambition is good, and I think all the resources and strategic directions put into growing our base in South Africa.
So, flipping back to Leslie as a leader, I often tell my executive team and others in the business that you're either working on the business or you're working in the business. Yeah. And there's a place for both. And the more senior you become, the more you should be working on the business rather than in it. Yeah. You've got to set up systems, procedures, structures in order to, take care of the in the business stuff. So as leaders, our minds never stop thinking. I tell my senior executive team if don't ask me if you need to go and do something like go and attend an extramural for your kids. Yeah. Don't tell me about that, because even when you're sitting there at the extramural, I can promise you your mind is working on the business. Sure. As a senior leader, executive in your role, I suppose the picture I'm trying to paint is your mind's never off. Doesn't matter where you are, your mind's never off. It's very difficult to turn it off. How do you balance that in your own career? How do you balance that never off switch?
So I think, interesting concept in working on the business, in the business. I have a personal challenge, which is I'm tempted to work in the business. I think because my career background is half in motor retail, so actually working in dealerships and running dealerships, so I understand how that part of the business works. and the second half in an OEM space. So I'm tempted, I think, always to go back and check what's kind of happening in the business and get involved in that, that part of the business, which leaves little time to work on the business. So, I have to constantly remind myself, like I said, in the traffic. Okay, today you need to focus on working on the business. Yesterday you didn't do what you said you'd do. So it's I have constant check-ins with myself to ensure that I'm balancing between working in the business and working on the business. I have a concept called on the table, in the fridge, in the bin, because you can't do everything. You've got to decide. Some things are urgent and priority, that's on the table. Some things are in the fridge, which are long term.
I love that.
You need to work on, and some things you've got to throw away, because you always have 10 ideas and you're never going to implement 10 ideas. So you kind of almost weekly have to decide what you're chucking in the bin, and what you're moving to the table. So kind of that's how I manage myself. And I mean, I'd like to think that I leave my team the space to challenge me when I'm micromanaging, to tell me that you're sticking in your nose where you shouldn't be. Because I think I have a good open relationship with the team. Yeah, so that's kind of how I manage my day.
You do it in the traffic, as you mentioned. So my question is, and I think you've largely answered it. My question is, how do you balance that? Do you switch it off, or do you just manage it?
I think I manage it. I don't think you can switch it off. I think that, you can attempt to switch it off and be having a conversation with your wife or watching something on TV, and then the thought comes into your mind, and then you end up thinking about it. So when I get home, I'm very deliberate about my conversation with my wife, and we spend quite a bit of time catching up on the day, because it's just the two of us at home now. So that kind of helps me switch off, and then we catch up on a bit of TV together. That kind of helps me switch off. If I read in the evening, it's not business related.
I get you.
So that kind of helps me switch off. And what I do, because I'm sure, like you said, you wake up at night, in the middle of the night, thinking about this, I just write it down and then go back to bed. And
get it out of your head.
Yeah, and deal with it the next day. And sometimes it's not even relevant. You thought about it and you wake up and it's like, oh, actually, it was dumb. It was dumb, yeah. Exactly. So, but it's tough to switch off. Yes. It's tough to switch off, and you got to be deliberate about it. I mean, I think taking short breaks. So, taking a Friday or taking a Monday a few times a year helps. I try to do that as often as possible. Even if I don't have the entire day off, I'd kind of do whatever's a really critical meeting in the day, but kind of spend the rest of the day personally. Yeah. Otherwise, you never switch off, because things just pile. I mean, you run a business, so things just pile. Yeah. You think it's going to be quiet next week, but it's never quiet. So if you don't block your diary and you're not deliberate about it, you won't switch off. Yeah. And if you don't switch out, just burnout's a bad thing.
I mean, there's some studies I've read where more frequent breaks, and I think you're alluding to this, more frequent breaks are actually better for curbing burnout than what going away for a long December holiday is. Yeah. Rather taking a Friday and a Monday every now and again, and deliberately, I like that term you use, deliberately switching off. Do you find that works?
It does. It works for me, because I commit to my wife as well, or my daughter, that this is my day off, and we're going to do things. We plan stuff, so I'm forced to do it. It's incredible, just taking a walk on the beach, or taking a walk in the bush, or wherever you go away to, or what it does to refresh you. I mean, yes. If I take a long weekend every 2 or 3 months, it sets me up for the next 2 or 3 months, and I'm good to go. So it does work for me. It does refresh me. And I mean, when you start your career, when you're in the auto industry, especially if you're in the sales environment that we in, every month ends the end of the world. And as you kind of get older and you progress in your career, you kind of realize that every month's not really the end of the world. Yeah. It's just another month. Not that you shouldn't put all your efforts into it, but there's a new month. And for those of us that have been in the industry a long time, you've had hundreds of month ends that you've come through. So I think, I think sometimes we beat ourselves up too much, We all have bosses, and the pressures can be immense at times. I think it's life's too short.
Yeah.
And I don't say this in the sense that we need to be blasé about our work, or we need to be complacent, or I think most of us in this industry are really intentional and are really committed to what we do, to the point that we put a lot of our personal lives sometimes into it. So I mean, otherwise we wouldn't survive in the industry. So that's not what I'm saying. But if I can give anybody advice, life's too short, and not every month end is the end of the world. There's always another month coming, take time.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm 47 now, and if I told myself this 20 years ago, I'd probably look a lot younger and have less grey hair. But it's a tough industry to be in. As much as it's rewarding, you got to take time off.
You got to. I mean, I don't know who came up with the word deadline, but nobody ever died.
Exactly.
On a deadline.
You're right. As crude as it may sound, one of my executives told me this, and he says this often. Unless somebody's dying, it's not urgent. It's
if life's not
exactly. It's not life-threatening, and it's kind of yes, there'll always be deadlines, and sometimes you match the deadline 100% and you deliver, and sometimes it's 80%. But I don't think it's without a genuine intent to deliver. And
Yes,
most
exactly.
people, most South Africans actually, I mean, we South Africans are generally hard-working people, and that's why we thrive when we go abroad. I mean, most people that go abroad have very successful careers.
Yes.
Because I think we as South Africans, we tenacious people, and that's something that we can be proud of.
Well, I am really, really happy that you were here, Leslie, and it's been an absolute treat to have you in that chair. And I hope you've had fun. I've had fun.
Yeah, thanks, George. It's been my pleasure to be here. And like I said, I think appreciate you doing this for the industry. I think it's an industry that's undervalued.
Absolutely. But a big part of our GDP.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. And I think it's an industry that we should do more to encourage young and upcoming South Africans to get into. So I'm glad you're doing this. Thank you for doing it.
Oh, thank you for being here.